Hello, my lovely students. How are you? So, our video today is going to be about transport through cell membrane. We already talked about cell membrane, cell organelles. Now, today, we are going to talk about how nutrients, elements, oxygen, carbon dioxide, water enter and exit the cell. I guess you are familiar with some terms like active and passive transport, but today we are going to take it in more deep information. So we will take transport through cell membrane. First of all, we are going to talk about cell transport. So the movement of material across the cell membrane either doesn't require energy, passive transport, or require energy, active transport. So here's the cell membrane that's composed of lipid bilayer phospholipid on yeah we have two layers of phospholipids, and these two layers are making the cell membrane. So the cell membrane is like the gate that let the molecules enter or leave the cell. So we have two types. We have um, active transport and passive transport. So active transport and passive transport. Active, it needs ATP, which is energy. Passive, it doesn't need any energy. It is caused in a roughly way, randomly, okay? From the higher concentration to the lower, we will talk about it now. So passive transport materials will move from higher concentration to low concentration according to concentration gradient. So this is a very important term. Concentration gradient. What do we mean by concentration gradient? Concentration gradient is moving from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. So the power that let the molecule move from outside the cell to inside the cell is concentration gradient. It's the thing that let this molecule moves. We call this transport passive transport. So passive transport doesn't need any energy to happen, okay? Okay. In active transport, unlike the passive transport, it needs energy. So active transport need energy to happen. And if you think about it, something that needs energy, it should be a large thing. So large things need energy to happen. So it's active transport. Material are moving from low concentration to high concentration against concentration gradient. So they need energy. Let's go deep. So passive transport has three types of we have three types. The first one is the simplest, which is diffusion, like the diffusion of oxygen from outside the body or the cell to inside our body to inside the cell. So how does oxygen enter our body? Because in the environment we are living, the oxygen outside is more, concentration of the oxygen outside is more than the concentration of the oxygen inside our body, right? So that's why it will go from higher concentration to low concentration according to concentration gradient. So oxygen enters our cells by passive transport, which is diffusion. So passive, which is diffusion, the molecule will go from high concentration to low concentration according to concentration gradient. Example: oxygen diffusion across alveoli. Oxygen diffusion across alveoli. So the oxygen will goes from the higher concentration, which is the surrounding, to lower concentration, which is the alveoli. The second type, we are still talking about passive transport. So the second type of passive transport, which doesn't need any energy, is facilitated diffusion. So facilitated diffusion, it's the transport of substance through protein membrane channels. So it needs a channel in order to transport the substance, but also it doesn't need any energy. So It's the transporting of substance through protein membrane like calcium ion, transport through protein channel like glucose. So glucose and protein channels, and calcium ion are transported by channels that doesn't need any energy, but we called it facilitated because these channels helps or facilitate the movement of these ions. Okay, so again, this facilitated diffusion, it's a type of diffusion that doesn't need energy, but it only need like a channel in order to enter, because calcium ions are positive, can't enter this membrane because this membrane is hydrophobic and calcium ions are hydrophilic. It can't enter the membrane, so it needs a channel to let it enter inside. Okay, but we still we are talking about passive transport. Okay, the third one, which is the most important, it's the movement of water, and I'm sure you are familiar with this. So the movement of water from higher concentration of water to lower concentration of water, we called it osmosis. So the osmosis, diffusion of water molecule across a cell membrane. So the first thing, diffusion of water molecule. Second thing, across a cell membrane. From hypotonic, we have two types. We have a hypotonic solution. Hypotonic solution is the solution that has a few amount of salt, like here's the salt, and here's the cell that has this salt. So the concentration of salt outside in the solution is less than the concentration inside. So we call this solution hypotonic. Hypo. Anything scientifically, anything hypo means low. Hypotonic, low in tonicity, low in salt, okay? Or low in concentration. So hypotonic, low in salt, more water. So hypotonic, more water, less solute. Unlike the hypertonic, which is like the Dead Sea, it has a lot of concentration of a lot of salt inside it. And here's the cell that has only this concentration of salt. So the water here has a high concentration of salt. So it has more solute. Okay. So I will tell you something very important. So we have three solutions. We have here isotonic, hypertonic, hypotonic. They placed a cell inside it. Here we have isotonic solution. Isotonic, that means it has the same amount of concentration of salt inside and outside the cell. So there is no difference in concentration. So here we have 20% solute concentration and 80% water, unlike outside, which they have 20% solute concentration, 80% water. So it has the same amount. Nothing will change on the water movement because there is no difference between outside and inside. Unlike the hypertonic, if we placed any cell inside a hypertonic solution, the water will goes from the higher amount of solution of water to lower amount of water. So here hypertonic, that means there is a high number of solute here. So water will move from the high amount of water to low amount of water in order to balance the high concentration. So here we have a high concentration of salt. How the cell will balance? It will let the water inside the cell to get out. What will happen to the cell? The cell will shrink. The cell will lose water and shrink. So if we placed a cell inside a hypertonic solution, it will shrink. If we place a cell inside a hypertonic solution, it will shrink. Okay? Okay, let's talk about hypertonic. So if we put a cell inside a solution that has no or low amount of concentration, so here we have more concentration than outside, so the water will go from the higher amount of water to low amount of water, so the cell will burst or lyse. So hypertonic, the movement of water from inside the cell to outside. Hypotonic, the movement of water from outside to inside. Here there is shrinking, and there is bursting or lysing. Okay. So if a cell placed in isotonic, iso means similar. If a cell is placed in isotonic solution, water diffuses continuously in and out, but there is no net change in the cell. If cell is placed in hypertonic, water will leave the cell, causing the cell to shrink, which is known as plasmolysis. If cell is placed in hypotonic, so is placed in water with low concentration, water flows into the cell, causing the cell to swell until it bursts. So this is an important slide. You should memorize well the movement of water, what will happen to the cell if we placed it in hypertonic and hypotonic. Here's an example of plant cell also. Plant cell, when we put it on isotonic, it will be flaccid, normal. Hypertonic, it will be plasmolysed. And hypotonic, it will be turgid. So what's the difference between plant cell and animal cell in putting them on hypertonic or hypotonic? Is in plant cell, there is a cell wall, so it resists the change in the cell wall. The cell wall is so rigid, unlike the cell membrane. So the cell wall only change a little bit. Turgid, which is the hypotonic, flaccid, isotonic, and plasmolysed with hypertonic. Okay, so you should to memorize this. So hypertonic, that means a concentration with a solution with high concentration of salt, and hypotonic, a solution with a low concentration of salt. Always water goes from high concentration of water to low concentration of water, because water loves to follow the salt. So always water goes from high concentration of water to low concentration of water, or water goes always and follow always the salt. So it goes from high concentration of water to high concentration of salt. Okay, to equalize. Okay, so the second one, it will be active transport. Active transport is the second type of transport we will talk about. It needs energy, and it will not happen without energy. So we have two types, and also it moves from low to high concentration, unlike the passive transport. So the first one is exocytosis. From the name of the transport, exo mean exit, release of molecule from the cell outside the transported by vessels. Exocytosis. The second one will be endocytosis. So molecules are brought into the cell by a vessel is formed. This vessel needs energy to form. So there are three types of endocytosis. Pinocytosis, cell drinking. Phagocytosis, cell eating. So if the cell wants to drink water, it makes a vessel and take the water inside it by endocytosis. All of this need energy to happen. So the intake of liquid into cell by budding a small vessel from the cell membrane, it's pinocytosis. Phagocytosis, the cell uses its plasma membrane to engulf a large particle, then encloses it by pseudopod, forming a vacuole. Like white blood cells, when it engulfs the bacteria, when blood cells engulf the bacteria, it engulfs it by phagocytosis, which is cell cell eating. Okay, and the third one, it's receptor mediated endocytosis. It need a receptor protein in order to happen. So the cell take up a large quantities of very specific substance that are drawn into the cell by vessels. Here is the vessels I told you about. So the first one, endocytosis, it take any material it want by vessel, the formation of pseudopodium. This is a pseudopodium or a vessel. It needs energy, so it's an active transport. Pinocytosis is cell drinking, it will drink water. And receptor mediated endocytosis, it need a receptor in order to attach to it and enter the cell. All of these three types need energy. So endocytosis, exocytosis, and receptor mediated endocytosis, all of this need energy. Okay, and it may go from low concentration to high concentration. One of the active transport are sodium potassium pumps, which are a nerve cell. They carried across the axon membrane against a gradient, so from the low concentration to high concentration. One of the example about active transport is sodium potassium pump, which is very important in the nervous system. Okay, so it let the potassium and sodium, it exchange potassium for sodium inside and outside the cell, and it need energy because they are going from low concentration to high concentration. So here's this diagram: passive and active. Passive, diffusion, osmosis, facilitated diffusion, simple diffusion for sure. Active, that need energy, we have sodium potassium pump or vessels. Exocytosis, endocytosis. Endocytosis has pinocytosis, phagocytosis, and receptor mediated endocytosis. So I guess you can answer this question now. Okay, and we finished our video for today. See you on the next video. Goodbye.